So the other thing, like, and when we're talking about like the different grits, so when you look at an edge through magnification, what we have is lots of teeth.
Yes.
So if this is like your 220, this will be like your 440, and then when you're getting into the 2000, you're getting smoother and smoother. But sometimes small teeth are great, right? Because they grab and they cut, and as long as I flash those burrs off, it's great.
Right.
So I've done it before where I've done a 120 grit on one side and then polished into it on the other. So you kind of have like aggressive teeth with micro teeth on it. It makes for a scary cutting edge. Another thought about stones, especially with the radius ones, is be consistent in wearing the stone, because when I work a stone, I'm removing part of the stone all the time. Like that's part of why it's wet. Part of why you use hone-in fluid is to keep the slurry from building up in the stone, but also to let like the surface break down a little bit. So I'm removing grit and then introducing fresh grit, which keeps the stone sharp. So if I just work one area, I'm going to create a divot in my stone. So the bigger area of my stone that I work, I'm going to consistently wear my stone.
And you always want to be pulling towards the edge, right? Like or it doesn't matter if you're pushing against the...
I don't think it matters. I like to draw towards me so the edge is going this way because it's easier for me to dismount.
Okay.
Whereas if I'm pushing in and I dismount, I stand a chance of dragging that edge.
Okay, so that the reason...
Just a personal choice thing.
Yeah, I was watching you and I never saw you go in the other direction, so I just assumed that was... So that's the reason. It's not the fact that it won't sharpen the blade. It's just that.
No. For me, it's a control thing, because if I'm pulling this way, and I think of it when I'm grinding I'm sharpening on the belts, my belt is always running like away from the edge because it makes it so much easier to dismount. So if I'm pulling this way, I just have to roll the knife up to dismount. And so I'm pushing. As I roll, I can grab that edge and start knocking it flat. And again, it's just knowing what I'm good at and knowing what I'm not good at. And I know that this way I can control the edge coming off the stone, whereas this way I'm like diving into the stone.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. No,
both will work. Personal preference thing.
Yeah, because on that wicked edge, sometimes on their instructionals, they're like rubbing straight up and down on it, and I guess under that thought process, it doesn't really matter. But like you're going out towards the edge, you're coming back on it. You're going up and down on it. It's like, so is there any, do you just want to keep a consistent direction?
Yeah.
Or does it even, make sure you finish in the same direction? Is that
I don't really, it doesn't really matter too much. Like, cause I'm just creating those teeth. I know you see people draw like just straight across, which in my mind, you're creating like a very flimsy edge, because if we look at so we talked about like we're creating teeth, which means I'm drawing in this direction across my stone, right? Okay. So here's my direction. If I draw in this direction, what I do is I create my teeth in this direction, which means that this edge, if we look at it in a cross section, has the potential to have a V in it, right? On a very small level, which means that this edge can break out easy. Okay. So again, I'm sure there's somebody out there who will have a different opinion, and I may well be wrong, but so if I'm just drawing here, then all my teeth are going in this direction, which in my mind, I can leave myself a very, very thin, weak edge. It may be very strong for a moment, but the chance of that cracking out as opposed to my teeth running this direction.
And that's why you go...
Yeah, that's why I kind of draw in this direction. Okay. So we're creating a little bit of an angle because we have to move the knife, right?
Yes.
To across that edge. But yeah, I don't do this.
Okay.
I just in my thought process, it's actually creating a very sharp edge, but not a strong one.
Yeah, and all this is your best practices.
Yes.
That's all I want.
Yes.
I'm not asking for all the variations to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what happens when things get confusing.
Yeah.
Because what happens is people go, well, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this, and it's like, well, you're not supposed to do all of them at once.
Pick one.
Yes, and get really good at it.
And this is what I know has worked for me.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool, man. Thanks, dude.
No worries.
It really helped because people really have. I mean, honestly, like in the last week, we've probably had 10 requests of, can you please do a video on how to sharpen the MDV?
Yeah.
And I get
And
it.
I
They want something from us.
Yeah.
Sure,
But
sure.
that's one of the things. It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you designed the knife. You guys made the knife. Like,
Well, let's face it, the reality of it is the reason we haven't done it is because all of our edges are done at the factory.
Right.
We don't physically do it. I don't consider myself a knife sharpening expert. That's Javan.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and then
and so
anytime
until we can get to the original designer of the knife and the person that actually physically makes, you know, knives that are well above $10,000 on a daily basis, who am I to say how to do it? Like,
Right.
go look at it. There's
and
good ways to do it, but I'm not going to be the one.
And that's exactly why I wanted you to tell me how to do this,
Yeah.
because I give you all my knives to sharpen,
Right.
right? So I sharpen this. I need to go cut something,
Yeah.
But that's where that information comes from,
Yeah.
And so I get it. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the MDV, is it trickier to sharpen than a full? Yeah, absolutely. But with the right tools and a little practice, it's not a difficult knife to sharpen. Right.
Yeah, it could be literally a 10-minute process.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, we just did it on it
Yeah.
on a honing rod, right?
Yeah.
You can just chase that back edge and
Do it quickly and
you've got a sharp knife again.
Yeah, and then there is also the conversation of what you're using the edge for, right? So
Yes.
there's no real reason for you to have it super razor sharp, because what are you using that knife for? You're using it out of context,
Yeah.
or you're trying to get an edge, or you're trying to find a purpose for it that it's not designed for.
Yeah.
If it's dull, then obviously sharpen it. But it's designed for very specific things, and you don't need a very sharp or razor.
Hair
like-
splitting edge.
Exactly.
And people do get confused about that because they want to put a polished razor edge on their knife.
It's like it
And
doesn't
correct me if
shave.
I'm wrong, but what I always tell them is you didn't buy a shaver, because if you've ever actually been to a barber that had a straight razor shave, every single time before they do it, they strop the knife, they sharpen the knife, and some of them will even put it on a stone first.
Yeah. So you're getting back to
Getting back to edge angle.
you're getting back to edge angle, right? So if you look at a razor like a true, you've got like an incredible hollow grind, right? That comes into a flat back edge.
Right.
So you're getting like this infinite thin edge on a razor.
Right.
Great for shaving, but you have to sharpen it each time because this is so thin. You're getting micro edges are breaking out the whole time.
Right.
So the sharper I get, the less life I'm going to get out of that edge, just because I've got such a thin section up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you look at an axe for splitting, right, and we've got like this beefy angle, but it'll stay there for years without you having to touch it up.
Right.
So we're dealing with between like a razor and an axe edge, depending on application of what we're doing.
Well, I think a lot of people don't understand that. I think when people think of a knife, they think that the primary bevel on the knife that makes up the edge of the knife is actually the edge, and it's not. And you drew it earlier, but draw that again, because you have your bevels, and then you have what starts as a land or a flat,
Yeah. So
and then you have a secondary bevel.
that's where you get into like katanas and things, which are zero grind, and people love zero
Right.
grind as well, right? Which is beautiful because you can do like your nice edge-free bevels and come into an infinite point on your bevel angles, which is
Just
great
two
because
edges coming together.
you have plenty of stock in behind, which gives like a sword lots and lots of support behind that edge. Now sharpening it becomes tricky because I'm actually polishing the full bevel on it each time I come to it.
Unbelievable.
Whereas, let's say if this is a center line, when I design, so this would be pre-sharpened.
Right.
Okay.
And people don't realize that there's actually a secondary angle on
Yes.
the edge itself.
Yes.
From the bevel of the knife.
Yeah. So say these are 4 degrees aside, right? And then I'll leave like a 0.01 land on that, which gives me like meat behind the edge, because if I try doing 4 degrees to a zero grind, it's awesome. It's going to be sharp for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to I'm going to start cracking
Right.
the edges out.
Right.
So I create this, and then I come in, and here is where my sharpen angle will be, inside the bevels.
Right. And I don't think a lot of people actually realize it. I don't know that I realized it before I started watching you make knives, is that, you know, you just think that, okay, well, I'm looking at my knife and there's a bevel there and it's sharp at the end.
Yeah, that's not a common sense thing. When
Right.
you look at it.
And there is literally a secondary angle, which is that angle. And that angle is typically put on by hand by the knife maker who's sharpening it, or the factory.
So unless somebody explains it to you in this fashion, draws it out for you, you're seeing the end result of everything when you pull out your knife. So your knife is the end process, is perfect. But if you were to make a knife, create a knife off of one of these blocks, right? The things is that, you know, you're gonna have to make that secondary angle.
You're going to have to create your sharpened edge. It's the last, and once everything is assembled and marked and ready to go, it's the last thing I do is sharpen.
Here's a good example. I've been carrying that black water. Look how dirty it is. It's really ugly and dirty. And it's got sticky stuff on it and silicone. And I use it and I've broken the tip off of it because I do things I shouldn't do. But when Javan resharpens this for me, I can't shave with it. Certainly can't shave my face. Because then the way I use this knife, that edge would get dull instantly because I've got such a thin edge on it. He'll put what we like to call a working edge on, which is not a razor edge, probably won't shave hair really super well, but I could cut boxes, I can cut rope, I can cut, I can do wire. And if I decide that, I don't have my cutters with me and I want to strip insulation off of a wire, I can get away with it because the edge is not so weak then that I'm not hurting the edge by doing so. And I use that all the time. I mean, and there's really no nicks in this edge. I mean, I was just stripping electrical wire with it last night.
Just like having a knife with a purpose-driven tool.
Yes.
Your edge is also purposely designed.
Yes.
Like,
And that's what I use that knife for. I don't take my MDV out and do things with it because you make fun of it, but in layman's terms, that's my defensive knife. That knife might need to save my life. This is my backup knife at that point.
It is meant for people or animals, like for a purpose of defense.
Saving your life.
That's why I call them people knives. Like that's the only reason I would use it. I have a utility knife on me that I would use that for.
Which is a weird concept because most people are like, I've never thought about carrying two knives. Why would I want to? Well, maybe it's a good idea. Now I've got a knife for the specific purpose that I bought it for, of defending myself. I just want to get an ice cream cone and get back home, but now I've been accosted.
Once you explain it, it makes a lot of sense. If I have a utility knife that I pull out and I've been using it for utility purposes, it may not cut. And that may be the only cut that I got. That entire defensive, scenario. And so I want a blade that I have not used for anything else because I know that it has the highest possibility of doing the damage I need it to do at that moment. And the utility knife is just, if it doesn't cut through something, you're like, I need to go sharpen it.
Okay.
And it won't kill you.
Right.
That penalty is not that high. It's just a little bit of time. A defensive knife or a fighting knife, there's a huge penalty if your knife doesn't work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, big penalty.